Hello everyone, my name is Willow, and this is my review of A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. It's captivating footage. Me cleaning my glasses off frame. So, A Wrinkle in Time is one of those books that I think I read in middle school, but from the moment the movie trailer came out, there was very little I remembered except for the winged centaur part. That part I remembered, but everything else that my memory had made up of what A Wrinkle in Time was and what the story was about was entirely wrong. So I'm not 100% sure if I read this one or if I read like another book in the series, but I could swear I read A Wrinkle in Time because I remember this cover so well, and I'm pretty sure it was actually on my teacher's bookshelf in her classroom, and that's where I read it. And for the life of me, like, there's so much of this story that I had clearly forgotten or misremembered with some other book that I might have been reading at the time. But now I've either reread it or read for the first time A Wrinkle in Time. And the thing is, I really did enjoy this book. There are snippets now that are reoccurring to me that I remember reading back then, like the fact that the book starts, "It was a dark and stormy night," which is, a classic overused trope in writing, and it's supposed to be something that you're really not supposed to go to. But, L'Engle makes it work. And it's so interesting to me that, a book that starts with that sentence, even in 1972 this book first came out, I think. 1962. For a book that originally came out in 1962, when that opening was kind of already, well used, for her to be able to make that opening work and to be such a well-respected book, really it just shows her abilities as a writer to be able to open with a cliche and create such a unique story that you can forgive that opening line and accept it for what it is, because it was a dark and stormy night, and that's kind of where the whole book is, in that dark and stormy night. The world that she builds around these characters, because you have this, this young girl who's having trouble in school, having trouble fitting in, and, thinks she's kind of a failure at everything she does, and then gets wrapped up in this universe-saving quest to find her father. It's hard for me to describe why I like this book so much, because there are so many reasons. Being a science fiction book, the most non-human characters are all the good guys. A lot of times sci-fi writers have this tendency to make their antagonists and their villains the most non-human elements of the world, because that's supposed to be part of the characters. This is such a different thing than a human, and that's clearly, different is bad. But that's not the case in this book. The forces of the light, the forces of good, are the most non-human characters in the entire book. The darkest characters, the most evil, are actually the most human. And, that also says a lot about the world that she's building and the allegory behind it that she's trying to impart. And I think that's another reason that I really like the book, is the general message that, complete uniformity is not the greatest thing. There are so many problems with that concept, and that's exactly what she explores in this book. And with the current state of the world, like, I think the movie is coming at just the right time because we need that exact message out there in the world. That's the reason that I wanted to go ahead and reread this with the movie coming out. One, to refresh my memory on what the book was, because when I saw the trailer, there was so little of it that struck a chord with me. It's like, oh, I remember that from the book. Oh, I remember that from the book. But again, that's clearly my faulty memory. And it must have been that I was reading like 2 or 3 books at the time, and that's why like the stories got a little jumbled in my brain, which happens, And it's been years since middle school, so things happen. I'm glad I revisited this book because I really enjoyed it, and now I want to go into the rest of this series, because that's something I never did read, unless I did read the 4th book at some point, because when I picked that up at the library sale, it did seem oddly familiar based on what I thought I remembered this was. So it might actually be, was it Many Waters? I think, yeah, Many Waters. It may have been that I read like A Wrinkle in Time and then Many Waters like back to back, and like my memory just kind of shoved the 2 of them together into Wrinkle in Time, because there are elements of what I was like reading on the back cover of Many Waters that seemed very reminiscent of what I thought Wrinkle in Time was. So there is every likelihood that like just somewhere in my brain just kind of like mashed the 2 of them together, because they take place in the same world, and I won't know for sure until I read Many Waters, which will be a while, because I have so many other things on my plate. But I wanted to get to this one now. I wanted to refresh my memory and do a review of this book in time for the movie, because, I wanted them to coincide. So here we are. And I love the misses, the 3 misses in the book. Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which. I'll say that again. Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which. The 3 of them being the characters that bring Meg and Charles Wallace and Calvin into the grander world that they haven't known about before, and send them on this quest to find Mr. Murray, Meg and Charles Wallace's father. And just, again, like, the kind of grandiose nature of who and what the 3 misses are. It's just like I really like those characters. I really like the way that Lingle wrote them, and I'm very excited to see how they are handled on the big screen. You get a taste of it in the trailer, and they've clearly taken a few liberties with the way that most people have pictured what Mrs. Whatsit alternate form is, because you see it in the trailer, and it's clearly very different from, again, what other artists have pictured in the past. And that's the artistic license, because there is room to kind of redefine the character a little bit, because it's not 100% set in stone in the way that Lingle describes the character and describes its form in the book. So there is room to play, and I'm glad they did that. It'll be interesting to see how the visual artists imagine that character and the different way that they handled it compared to previous versions and compared to other artists, like the cover artist here. I'm generally looking forward to the movie. I'm looking forward to seeing like how Ava DuVernay imagines the world through her eye, through her lens. So I'm very excited for the movie, and I'm so glad I reread the book. And I'm glad I revisited this world. It is such a great world, and I think it holds such an important message. And I hope that the movie, piques interest in young readers to go in and read not only the first book, but the entire series. I think that's all I have for you today. As always, I hope you're all well, and I will see you next week. I wanted to refresh my memory and also do a review. I wanted to refresh my memory and do a review. Cannot talk!